Speaking of Courage podcast, episode we don't know, but we are back in studio after a very hot week here in California. What's up, man?
Not too much, man. Very hot, and you got some big fires going on. So.
Yeah, I woke up yesterday 115 degrees, 10 a.m. Yeah. Crazy. So where are we headed today?
Speaking of heat, we're going to, we're sticking with World War II. We got another Riverside hero. This is going to be our last of our local ones that I'm aware of, unless I find some more. Last of the Riverside trio of Medal of Honor recipients from the Casablanca area. And we're going to be doing World War II.
This from Casablanca?
Yeah, he's from Casablanca.
Okay, so a funny story. We actually got in contact with Tina Duran, and she said, in the last message, I didn't send it to you, the last message, is this the guy that grew up on the same street as Jesus?
I would imagine so. He lived at 7620 Casablanca Street. So yeah.
Okay, so Tina told me that these two grew up in the same on the same street from the same exact neighborhood.
Oh wow, yeah,
isn't that crazy?
It's Casablanca Street. So yeah,
That's
and
wild.
This is World War II again. So we talked about Ismael Villegas, small community there. This is Salvador Lara. He's about I think 4 years older than Ismael, but they would have been in the same area, same circles, maybe even same schools and all that.
So they knew each other growing up.
Potentially, he's a bit older. A couple years older. He's joined the war early, but yeah, same circles, probably same families.
What a trip.
Same big community.
What are the chances you think of coming
like
off the same street?
That's what I'm saying. The trio, because we have the again, I think it's Pueblo, Colorado, where they talk about the home of heroes, because there's 4 living Medal of Honor recipients that were from there. But
in Colorado,
Riverside's got 3 in just this small community. So that's pretty unheard of, as far as I know.
And so far, they're the best community as far as honoring them too.
Yeah, they put out some work on that stuff. We got libraries, we got street signs, we got statues,
middle schools,
all that kind of stuff. So
it was funny when I was doing like the picture research and stuff for Villegas, right?
Yeah, Villegas.
Yeah, that's what you type in his name to find pictures, and you get a middle school. So
that's
really
the first
cool.
thing that comes up. So that's good. It's keeping his name alive.
It's a perfect way to keep somebody's name alive.
Yeah,
much like the base, Norton. You know,
right.
Even though most people don't know what that was,
exactly.
But still, at least for family and friends and people that served with them, it's a good reminder. So, okay, where are we headed, man?
Yeah, so we're dealing with World War II again. This is going to be the Italian campaign. So we actually talked about the Italian campaign a little bit with George Staccato.
Yeah.
That's where he earned his Medal of Honor. He's the one who was from Redlands, or Colton area, Redlands. And then Audie Murphy actually fought in Italy a lot. So if you've seen To Hell and Back, things like that, or those older movies, a lot of that is that's Audie Murphy's movie that he actually starred in. He's the most decorated combat veteran in American history, he's considered sometimes.
Okay.
But yeah, so we have Salvador Lara. Again, he's a Riverside guy.
Salvador Lara?
Lara, yeah.
Lara.
I'm gonna say Lara because I don't try to do accents.
You order your quesadilla?
No, I can say quesadilla, but it sounds more patronizing when I try to say it wrong. So I'm just going to stick with Salvador Lara.
That is a really weird topic, off topic. But
there's a fine line.
Because you don't want to be the white guy that's like, I like carne asada.
Yeah, because then you just look stupid. Yeah.
But yeah, the other way looks bad too.
I don't pronounce German names with a German accent.
Yeah, exactly.
Spanish. It's no disrespect. I'm bad at it, so I'm going to stop.
So we're in Italy now.
Yeah, so he's born in 1920, ends up again in Italy where Staccato fought, where Audie Murphy fought. It was a horrendous campaign. The Italian campaign was, initially it was presumed that it was going to be easy. So we talked about World War II again. We're fighting the Germans. We're also fighting the Italians. I'm not sure if you're aware of the Italians.
No, I'm not aware of that.
Yeah, so the Italians were on the Axis side. There was several countries. It wasn't just Germany and Japan. There was multiple countries.
When you say Axis side, is that the enemy?
Yeah, so it's generally Allies and the Axis. The Allies were mainly the United States, the Soviet Union, England, and all the other countries that were basically on our side.
If Italy's with Germany, how does that happen? They meet up and say, hey, we're on the same side, or we're fighting for the
treaties and things like that before. Have you ever heard of Mussolini?
Yeah.
So Mussolini Il Duce, he's kind of Hitler's Italian counterpart. They have similar goals. He wants to expand his empire, so they kind of combine forces, and then they're working together.
And then how, I've asked that before, then how they already had it pre-divided up, how it was going to work?
To a degree, yeah. So the Italians wanted to, one of the fanatical, this is oversimplifying, but they wanted to restore the ancient Roman Empire. So they're attacking these North African colonies, and that's where the invasion of Ethiopia and things like that happen.
Okay.
With these modern Italian troops attacking these poor Ethiopians and stuff like that.
It's weird with my limited knowledge on this. I always thought it was like Germany against everybody.
Yeah, no, it's not.
You know?
It was a lot of countries against a lot of countries, and a lot of little satellite nations, and a lot of colonies, and a lot of people that had treaties and things like that. Everything's intermingled and combined. And
so
a lot of
these particular battles, are we going into Italy?
Yeah, correct. So the Italian front, you think of, again, we always talk about D-Day and stuff like that in France. The Soviets are fighting for their lives on the Eastern Front. we decided we were going to attack Italy. Winston Churchill called it the soft underbelly of Europe. They thought, this will be real easy. We'll attack in Italy. We'll see if we can knock the Italians out of the war. We'll draw German troops away from the Soviet Union, and we'll draw them away from the invasion of France. It turned out to be a horrendous campaign.
Why was the prejudgment that Italy would be easy?
Well, the Italian troops were not so good, and they didn't expect a stiff resistance, and that proved to be true from them. Unfortunately, the Germans that were there had different ideas, so they put up...
So the Germans that came to defend...
Correct.
Were ready to roll.
Yeah, so the Germans, as always, were ready to roll, and they fought very, very hard for the territory, and every inch of ground that we fought for was very hard.
How was Germany so much more advanced than everybody else in this regard? Like, when it came to military, you always hear, like, they were ahead of the game with
now
everything.
We're going way off.
But just
the Germans, a lot of it is culture. Germany wasn't always Germany. It was the Prussian Empire before, and the Prussians were what you think of like toy soldiers, just everybody's militaristic, marching around.
Oh, okay, so it's cultural.
Your prestige in the country was based on your military standing.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so then when it becomes Germany, and then in World War I, they're fighting everybody. They're almost victorious, and then they were humiliated after the war. They were just downtrodden and treated like shit, and pressed upon them all these things, and they're seeing all this stuff going on in their country. So they had this military heritage, and they had frustration and rage, and then when Hitler came about and started restoring the armies and things like that.
So it's not Hitler took over and then they just became this military thing. They were already
correct.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of disgruntled veterans and things like that roaming the streets from World War I.
Okay.
Yeah, they were within a touchdown of winning World War I, and instead they were humiliated, and like I said, the old stereotypes and adages of it took a wheelbarrow full of cash to buy a loaf of bread, and they're watching their cities are in rubble and things like this, and they're getting blamed for the whole war. And it's
knowing that they almost
yeah,
won.
Correct.
Oof. Yeah. Okay. So that explains a lot of the passion.
It doesn't
for
excuse
it.
anything they did, but it sure, yeah.
Okay.
And then on the flip side, we have back in America, across the whole country, we're suffering from the Great Depression almost worldwide, after the stock market crashes.
So we're in a similar position.
So we're in a similar position caused by other things. Everybody's dirt poor, everybody's struggling, everybody's losing their jobs. Yeah, soup lines, all these kids. Salvador, Ismael, they're seeing this kind of stuff with their families and everything too, right? They're going through this with the country. They're watching their dads lose their job. They're watching their country fall apart. They're seeing all these, you wouldn't call them refugees because they're from our own country, but the Okies coming west and stuff like that because their homes are devastated. They have no crops. They have nothing to eat. People are starving. People are begging. People are jumping out of windows and killing themselves and things like that. So we're growing up with this too, but...
Perfect recipe.
Yeah, perfect recipe for a world war, which is what we got. But by the 40s, when the economy started picking up, the war saved our economy, right? And then Roosevelt and the New Deal and all those things. So it was a very hardy stock of people that went off and fight. But if you have someone like Salvador, who was born in 1920 in Riverside, it's a little different in California, especially in the Hispanic community, right? If you're already poor, it doesn't necessarily make a difference that the rest of the country's poor along with you.
But welcome.
Yeah. So he would have been growing up through the Depression, just like everybody else. And then when the war years are coming, he's seeing the same things everybody else is. Again, to go back to that Southern California, that Riverside, San Bernardino County area, he worked in an orange packing center, right? It was called the Victoria Avenue Citrus Association Orange Packing Plant, which is in Casablanca. So Ismael's out picking the oranges, and Salvador is packaging the oranges, right? Maybe they ran into each other. I don't know. He's a couple years older, like I said. But he's going to be seeing these same things. He's going to be seeing Pearl Harbor bombed. He's going to be seeing, war on the horizon. They're going to be getting all these news reports from the front. It's kind of like today, every time you watch the news, it seems like it's something scary, like, oh my God, what's going on in this country? With them, it was even worse because it's September 1st, 1939. Hitler's invading Poland, and now they're invading Austria. Now France is falling. Like, you're just watching the world crumble, and there's these streams of humanity is just dying all over the world.
Now, is there a sense of urgency? Because every time you're getting news, you're hearing Germany's advancing.
Right. Germany.
So there has to be like a panic.
Germany was kicking ass, and that was the thing. And we're in this position of, a lot of people are like, we need to stand up and we need to do something, but everybody else is saying this is not our problem. Remember World War I? We went and we stood up for them, and we the war to end all wars. It didn't win anything. Let Europe fight their own problems. Let them have their own problems, but. It was bigger than that, obviously.
So then once Pearl Harbor happened, that's when we said, all right.
Correct. So Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, and then we declared war, and then Germany and Italy actually declared war on us because they were Japan's ally.
As stupid of a question as this is, what was their goal for the U.S.?
Who, Germany or Japan?
Yeah.
I think realistically, they probably would have wanted us to stay out of the war, but because of their treaties and everything.
But once Pearl Harbor happens, now they
Japanese?
know. Right. So say Pearl Harbor happens. what is their end game for us?
Well,
Is it for them to take over the United States?
Probably not. The Japanese are expanding their empire. We're blocking them in a lot of ways. We're stopping them from getting the oil they need for their expansion. They want to control the Asian hemisphere, basically. We're in the way of that. I don't think they necessarily would have wanted to occupy.
So it was more like a punch to stay out of it?
Correct. They were trying to knock
that makes more
sense. I mean,
sense.
you can debate it back and forth, but I think they know that their tiny little island would never occupy our land mass, but they wanted to be able to prevent us.
Such a trippy thing. When you look at the size of our land mass, it would be a very, just strategically, just based on land, it would be very difficult to...
And that's where the quote comes from, the Japanese, you can never invade America because there'd be a gun behind every blade of grass. They know that we were a well-armed populace, and they didn't have a chance in hell of actually doing that. But if they can keep us from stopping their offensive war, it's a different story.
Okay, so more of a punch to stay out of it. We're doing our thing.
And a lot of war is about gaining foothold and gaining ground, right?
Yeah.
So if they can stop us from doing that.
Okay.
Yeah, so that goes back to Italy. So Salvador, he ends up joining the army in 1942, so pretty early in the war, whereas Villegas was 1945. Salvador goes over in 1942. He ends up in the 41st Infantry Division, which is actually a unit of guys from the Southwest. Initially, it was National Guard units, New Mexico, Arizona, things like that. So he's actually probably with a lot of Hispanic guys, even though he's from California. He's from a different area than they are, but they ended up getting shipped overseas. So we decide we're going to attack Italy, the soft underbelly. This is going to be the way into Europe. This is going to be nice and easy. Obviously, things don't work out like that. So we started in Sicily. Sicily's the little island off Italy, right? So they invaded Sicily. The 45th Infantry Division, he's in the 180th Infantry Regiment. They went straight from the States into combat. So all the other units that were fighting had fought in North Africa. They had time together. They had things like that. The 45th and the 180th, which he was a part of, they went directly from the U.S., and they landed in Sicily, and they start fighting in this island. Immediately. So as expected, the Italians didn't put up much of a fight. The Italians are surrendering, they're retreating, they're not fighting. But the Germans weren't having it, right? So we caught them off guard, but it ended up being a very hard fought for the island. It was a lot more successful than we thought, but just like we talk about, you have the hills, you have the rain. Because it's island passes, think like Thermopylae, remember the movie 300? You'll have these little roads where you have on one side you have a cliff, and the other side you have mountainside, right? And then in front of you have the Germans. So there's a lot of fighting like that. So it's a hard-fought battle. It ended up lasting 38 days. More successful than we thought it was, but we're thinking, hey, we're kind of kicking these Germans' ass, but the Germans were smarter and better soldiers than that. They were doing an organized retreat back across the peninsula into mainland Italy, right? So as we're pushing them, we're going, yeah, we're kicking their ass, this and that. They're just kind of falling back, getting their troops out. So they ended up, 100,000 German and Italian troops escaped. So when we took Sicily and went, yeah, we won, realistically 100,000 troops escaped. So now we have to evade actual Italy, right? The actual mainland.
Now you're going up against 100,000 strong?
Now, a lot more than that. Now the Germans know what we're up to, basically, right? So they send 16 divisions to reinforce Italy. Divisions 10 to 15,000 guys, in addition to those troops that are already there, right? Italy...
And they know what we're bringing.
Now they know what's up. Yeah, so now we can divert our troops over here, which is essentially what we wanted. We wanted to draw these troops down so we could invade France. But they were ordered to basically make the Americans and the Allies and the British pay as dearly as possible for any of this land, right? Every single person that we kill is going to slow them down. So they're coming with a will to fight, and they're going to do a good job of it. They have good defensive lines. Yeah. Salvador Lara and his unit, they're going to land up behind Salerno, and we're going to start pushing up the Italian mainland. We thought, again, hey, Sicily wasn't that bad. Let's push forward. But we end up pushing north. There's all this German resistance. There's mountains. There's mud. They called it the days of mud, mules, and rain, basically, right? These cliffs and these hills were so steep that we couldn't maneuver tanks through. So this was basically infantry and artillery through the whole of southern Italy. It was so bad that they started using mules to carry equipment, to carry the dead, to carry their machine guns and stuff.
Because you're just walking through mud?
Because you're walking up through mud. People are getting trench foot. We haven't seen trench foot really since World War I. Do you know what trench foot is?
Kind of.
Yeah, so essentially these guys are living and sleeping in the mud so much that their feet are constantly covered with mud and they're wet. So their think of like when you stay in a swimming pool too long,
Yeah.
the skin's coming off their
Gets
feet.
soft.
In the Italian campaign, we actually had more casualties due to sickness and trench foot than we did to battle
Oh, you can
casualties.
die from it.
You get taken off the line because you can't fight anymore.
Oh, okay.
Remember, a casualty is wounded or dead.
Yeah.
But their skin's literally peeling off of their feet.
Like a bed sore, kind of?
Exactly like a bed sore. Yeah, if you take your boot off, the skin comes off with it,
Wow,
essentially,
just from
right?
constantly being wet
raw,
and infection.
constantly wet, constantly muddy, constantly damp. You can't let it breathe. If you take your socks off and your shoes off, your feet will swell up and you can't get your shoes back on. So they're scaling up and down these cliffs. They're doing all this kind of stuff. They can't even bring the Jeeps up these narrow roads. And again, we're fighting the Germans, right? The weather is almost like the Germans had it on their side. It's just horrendous. The winds are bad, the weather's bad, you can't sleep because it's constantly raining on you. The more you drive what you can through the mud, it just creates those trenches and it clogs upon your feet and stuff like that. So every step is tiring, every step is exhausting, and then you're also facing the Germans, right?
And they're in fortified positions.
And they're in these hugely fortified positions. So what we end up trying to get up to is what's called the Gustav Line, which completely crisscrosses Italy at this choke point. And it's fortified machine guns, it's barriers, it's barricades, it's everything they have. It's their wire, and it's these determined-ass German troops that are...
So they're waiting for us.
They're waiting for us.
So
and
they're not
Correct.
marching in mud. They're
Correct.
not sleeping in rain.
Exactly. They're where they have been. They have their supplies. They know what they're doing. They
What a
have the high
difference, huh?
ground. Oh, yeah. And these are organized, good troops. Again, I don't want to sound like I'm praising the Germans too much, but they knew what they were doing when it came to fighting, right?
Yeah.
Every hill, one of the soldiers said there's only two directions in Italy, up and down, going up the hills and down the hills, up the hills and down the hills. They're exhausted by the time they get in all of these fights.
Waiting on a well-rested...
Right. Just like we talked about in all these other battles and all these other videos that we've talked about, you're generally charging uphill at a fortified position. They have the high ground. They have the drop. They know their position. And the Germans, they're not stupid. They're not sitting there. They're not fanatical. They're not in the sense that they're just waiting to die and dying in place. They start losing, they'll fall back. They'll pin you down, they'll move back. They'll pin you down, they'll move back. They'll pin you down and move back. Then when you relax and head back in, they'll mortar or their artillery on your position and they'll take it back. And then they'll do it again and they'll do it again. So they're doing these rear guard falling actions as we're chasing them everywhere. And they're doing a great job at it. They're very experienced.
Man, what a weird enemy to face, huh? When you think you're winning, you're winning, and then you get artillery.
Textbook, yeah. And they're very well known for counterattacks, right? Germans don't give up positions and just leave them gone. They're going to hit you back afterwards. So it's horrendous. So yeah, it's psychologically, it's just, you don't even know what you're fighting for at this point anymore. You're dead on your feet. You're so exhausted that as you're moving forward, the Southern Italian campaign ends up taking 119 days. The 180th is on the line, Salvador Lara's unit. So that's sleeping in mud, that's fighting the Germans, that's watching people die. They spend Thanksgiving on the line. So you're getting...
third of a year.
Correct. So,
Wow.
yeah, Thanksgiving dinner, the family's at home, saying prayers. They're giving you, hey, we got a turkey dinner. By the time it gets to the line, it's frozen, and you're trying to eat this nasty food, and you probably don't even care, right? They spend Christmas on the line, and then they finally get relieved. The American advance is stopped, and the British advance, is stopped in the mountains. We're stuck. We can't beat these Germans. We can't get through. So, kind of like MacArthur in Korea, we decide, well, we'll go land behind the enemy. We'll do an amphibious landing. So they end up landing at Anzio. That's where Audie Murphy saw some of his first combat and stuff like that. So we do a beach landing, which is never easy. Excuse me.
And these beaches are fortified as well?
Some of them are. See, that's the thing about being in a defensive position. They don't know where we're going to land, so they can't defend everything. So initially when we land at Anzio, we land behind the lines, and we have a lot of success. The Germans aren't there. So we start pushing in. Some bad leadership decisions decide instead of pressing the threat and going forward, they say we need to get this beachhead secured so we don't get knocked off it if they attack, right? So rather than pushing forward, they end up being stuck on the beach. So we end up start digging in. The guys start digging fortifications. They end up living like animals. We ended up for 135 days on the Anzio beachhead. And that's every night the Germans are pounding them with artillery. The Germans are counterattacking. The German Luftwaffe, the planes, we didn't have air superiority like we talked about in the other battles. So they're sinking ships in the harbor. They sunk a ship full of troops with devastating losses out in the harbor. They're strafing the American position. So our troops don't even have the will to go forward. They're just digging in. They're literally living like animals. They're digging holes. They're sleeping in these holes that are
just trying to survive.
The bottom 2 inches are water cover. So you're constantly wet. You're constantly tired. This is when you're talking about you go to the bathroom in your helmet and you dump it up over the side because you don't want to get it. You're doing patrols and things like that, so it's almost like a war of attrition against us. We're getting picked off, and the Germans are losing less guys than we are. Most of these battles we're talking about in Korea and Vietnam, we're losing 1 for every 10. The Germans are having less casualties than we are. They're falling back and we're invading, but they're inflicting more casualties than we are. So
they're willing to give up the land.
Sure. They don't want to give up the land, but overall, it's doing pretty good things for them, right? Because we're trying to knock Italy out of the war, which we did. We're trying to draw troops away, but if they're able to hold us at bay with these minimal amount of troops, they're the ones that are doing the good thing, right?
Yeah.
They have these rockets. Have you ever heard a screaming Mimi?
Uh-uh.
It's a rocket that just has this loud. Think of the fireworks, the ones that go. Yee!
Yeah.
Their rockets are like that. So when you're trying to sleep and stuff like
You just
that,
hear
you're
that.
hearing that scream, and then you're hearing explosions
And
waiting. And then some people, you're diving for cover, and other people they don't even care because death would probably be a sweet release at that point and stuff.
After 100 days.
Right. After 135 days ended up being the whole Anzio beachhead. And like I said, the rain is just coming down. The Germans are attacking with frequency. They mount a massive attack and to try to push us off the beach, because if we lose that toehold, we're going to have to take it again, right? Fortunately, they failed, and we were able to finally break out. Eventually, we're behind the Gustav line. They pushed up through the Gustav line, and they were able to crack that. So now we have the Germans on the run again, right? What should we do? Press the threat. Go after them. Psychologically and not strategically, though, they wanted to go after the city of Rome. So they went after Rome instead of chasing these Germans. So the Germans escaped again, basically, right?
So taking over Rome is more of like a...
We wanted to take the Italian capital and say, hey, look what we did. But really, strategically, it wasn't as important as trying to trap these Germans that we had. So they were able to survive and fight another day, basically.
Man.
Yeah, so there's a lot of good... have you ever heard of Willie and Joe? If I showed you a picture, you might see him. There's a famous World War II cartoonist. It's just these two sad sack GIs.
Yeah.
That's all the Italian campaign. They're just constantly covered with mud. They have beards. They're just, complaining all the time and stuff like that. That is the Italian campaign. That's
so the morale's awful.
Morale's awful, and these guys are just, they're the dog faces, they call it. They're tired, sore, miserable infantrymen. It's also where Ernie Pyle, he was the best war correspondent in probably history. He was serving during the Italian campaign, so a lot of the stories that you'll hear are from his. He wrote a great short story called "The Death of Captain Wasco," I think it's called. It's a beautiful short story. Maybe I'll post it on Facebook or something like that. But it's essentially about these guys that are fighting up near Monte Cassino. They're constantly in combat, and they had this leader, their captain, who they all looked up to like a father figure. And they would talk about how he would never let anything bad happen to them. He always stood up for them, and then one night he gets killed. So they're waiting for his body basically to come down. So they're watching the mules bring the body down, these guys at the bottom, and they draped his body over a mule because that's the only way they could get him down. And the Italians were superstitious, so they were scared to be around dead bodies. So the Americans had to lead the mules. So these kids are dragging these bodies on mules down. And when they finally get to the bottom, they're just kind of dumping the bodies off. And then when they get to Captain Wasco, they pull him off, and he's got rigor mortis, so he pretty much stands up when they pull him onto his feet. And then they lay him down, and each soldier kind of goes to him and crying, says,
wow.
I'm real sorry this happened to you. And they're all trying to say their piece, and some of them are silent, and some of them are cussing like, God damn it, why did this happen to you? And one of the things that hits me is he was only 23 years old. The way they talk about him was
sounds like this grizzled veteran.
This old guy, but he's only 23 years old. Yeah, it's a iconic image of the war, but it's kind of beautiful when you look at it. But like I said, to me, the idea of the war is so desperate and it's so primal. I mean, we're fighting with, we have rockets, we have planes, we have the atom bomb by the end of the war, but we're literally with rifles dragging bodies down on mules down a mountainside, and that's what these guys are dealing with.
Yeah, you're not able to use a lot of technologically.
None of technology doesn't matter if you can't use it, right?
Yeah.
So they're living in holes like cavemen, and they're shooting each other like they were in the Civil War from these fortifications, and they're using pack animals and stuff like that. And guys have trench foot, and guys have battle fatigue, and guys are the constant shelling and things like that. That's what the Italian campaign was.
And this is where Lara is?
And this is where Lara is, and he was with the 180th, so he would have been with them, like I said, through Sicily, through southern Italy, through that push-up, then pulled out to the Anzio landing. They're going to be stuck on the beach.
He's at that beachhead?
Correct. He's going to be, and they were in reserve for the landing, but they would have been on the beach, living in the holes, sleeping in that water, sleeping in that mud.
So this is
facing
what
that
has
constant
led
rain.
up.
This is what leads up. This is these hundreds of days. Again, Christmas on the line, Thanksgiving on the line.
And he's
all
there the
these
whole
things.
time.
He's there through all of this, and it's a little bit hard to find too much information on him, unfortunately. But just based on his unit and when he went in, July 28th, 1942 was his enlistment, so that's pretty early. So he's going to ship overseas with them because it was June of 1943 was when we landed in Sicily. So he's going to be going through all of this, just like all these other guys are, right?
Yeah.
So again, think of the bond that you have when you're sleeping in the mud with these guys.
Absolutely.
And when I'm saying sleeping
That
in
is
the mud,
literally all you have.
yeah,
at
this
point.
isn't me at Fort Hood, Texas, and my buddies being miserable with chiggers. This is literally like guys are dying every day. All these bodies are stacked on the beach waiting for the hospital ships. Some of the hospital ships are getting hit, you know what I mean, by aircraft. You're
Everything's
listening.
bad.
Everything's bad. This is just hell. And they're forgotten. It's almost the Italian campaign is completely overlooked. There's a Willie and Joe comic of Willie and Joe. They're in Germany and they're telling the American there, hey, we just came up here to get some headlines or something, because it's like nobody gives a shit about them, you know. Especially as we got closer to D-Day. We still fought in Italy till the end of the war, even after we invaded in France and stuff like that.
Why do these certain areas of the war get kind of forgotten, even though it's just as important, right?
It's just the media, how they want to portray certain things, and how the campaigns want to look. You know, hey, we're breaking ground and we're going through and we're invading France. We're on Fortress Europe. It's like we've been in Fortress Europe. We've been in Italy all this time, but the Italian campaign did not go well, so it wasn't going to be as
so it's not going to be as promoted.
Yeah, a lot of like military guys will know names like Anzio and Salerno and Sicily and Palermo, and again Audie Murphy. That's where he.
Yeah.
Audie Murphy actually wrote a poem about Anzio after the war and stuff. It's the crosses grow on Anzio where hell is 6 feet deep. It's a cool little short poem basically saying hell is 6 feet deep, meaning it's, you know, the length, the depth of your trenches, the depths of your foxhole, you're just in hell, the blood-sodden ground, and the crosses are growing, you know, almost like picturing like flowers growing through the rain, but it's really the blood from the soldiers is enriching the sod, which is making the
Wow.
I mean, it's only like 5 lines, but that's kind of what it's emblematic of. And then obviously 6 feet is an allusion to the grave, 6 feet deep.
Now, when
so.
these soldiers are killed, like that guy in charge, do they bury him there?
Sometimes. So they had field graves, and you'll have those temporary graveyards and things like that, where graves registration would take your dog tag and pound it on a stake, and then later they'd come and they'd have these big, nice military cemeteries and stuff. Other ones, some bodies weren't recovered. Some bodies were churned into the mud. A lot of them got shipped home after the war. There's some great books on the graves registration and things like that. But yeah, a lot of these guys were just buried overseas.
Imagine that responsibility. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Trying
yeah.
to keep track and
Yeah.
like, man.
And that's why a lot of them got mixed up. And in the Pacific, it was even worse. A lot of bodies were said that they were buried at sea when they weren't. They found their bodies since then, or vice versa. Again, to keep going back to Audie Murphy, just because it's the Italian campaign, in his book, To Hell and Back, the first person he saw die was in Italy. And he looked over. He said it was a redheaded soldier against a rock, and he got hit square with artillery, and he just dissipated into nothingness. So we just saw him obliterated, right? So never going to find his body because there is no body, right?
Yeah, man.
And that's all over these kinds
And that's
of
a
things that are
human
happening.
being, man.
Right, that
You
was
know
a
what I
human
mean?
being.
It's
Yeah,
so-
that's somebody's son.
It's so easy to say all the losses or how many, people we lost in the battle, but each one of
Right.
those is a human being.
114,000 casualties in the Italian campaign. It doesn't matter if
That's
I said
insane.
100,000 or 5,000 or a million. It doesn't matter. Every one of those is someone's. When you say 114,000 is mother's sons, though, it's
Yeah.
and females too.
That's
There
the
were
crazy
nurses and
part.
things
When
like
you get
that.
into these stories that we're highlighting, of course, we're doing the Medal of Honors and
Right.
these big things, but man, every time we're talking, it's, we had this many casualties.
Right.
Each one of those has a story just like
right.
this.
And the guys on the hospital ship that were the sailors out there and stuff, and then they got strafed and they got killed and stuff
Yeah.
too. They never made it to the battle. They never were anything
Yeah.
like that. But they're still, their family still gets that telegram and still gets that.
It's
that
such an
notification.
interesting way to look at it, man. Wow. Okay, so where's he at during his action?
So in May of 1943, they're near a place called Aprilia, Italy. And again, with the accents, I'm not going to do an Aprilia. I'm not going to do an Italian accent either. But they're chasing the Germans north, and the Germans are falling back in an orderly retreat. Again, they're not panicked. They're not on their heels. They're not anything like that. They're shooting and maneuvering. They're covering and they're moving back, but in a large-scale action. These massive German forces are moving back. So we're not shooting at Germans' backs as they're running. We're moving from hill to hill and finding fortifications. You're shooting at them. You're killing as many as you can, and then you hit the next one, and then you're hitting, and moving and moving and moving.
What do they do with those fortifications after you overrun them?
My dad was in Germany in the 60s. He was stationed in Hohnsfeld, Germany. I think it was Hohnsfeld. He said they're still there. They were still there, some of them. They're these big fortifications.
So
and
they
these
don't
big
blow them
concrete
up or
bunkers.
anything?
They're too big. You can't, to blow them up would be
waste.
It would be a waste, but I mean, you'd be like destroying nearby towns and things like that. They're huge.
Are
These
the machine
big
guns still there?
Oh, no, all that
So
stuff's
that
all gone.
stuff will be taken.
The ones that I'm aware of that are still there now, they're all covered in graffiti and stuff. A lot of them have been destroyed since, but like I said, my dad was there, I think 66, 68-ish.
Okay.
And a lot of these fortifications were still there.
So they overrun one, or you kill the machine gunner in that position, and then we just run past it.
We just push past it.
It doesn't even matter.
We can occupy it.
Doesn't do us any good, right?
Yeah, it's not going to do any good behind you. Yeah, we're not trying to use German weapons and stuff like that. I mean, it would happen, but generally you wouldn't. But so Lara and his unit, they're moving forward. The dog-faced infantry, they're pushing forward just like always. In a place near Aprilia, Italy, he's a BAR gunner. I don't think we've talked about BARs yet. So we talked about the machine gun with Jesus. A BAR is an automatic rifle, but it only has 20-round magazines. So it's a big freaking, it's not a machine gun. It's a big automatic rifle. It weighs 20 pounds. It's about 47 inches long. So
what's the difference between a machine gun and an automatic rifle?
Technically, a machine gun should be belt-fed, and it should have a crew. So this is a magazine, what people sometimes call a clip, like you put it in. It's only got 20 rounds, I think, or 20 rounds. I think they're 30
that goes
6.
quick.
Those go quick when you're on automatic. So you can only carry as many as you carry on you. So it's a squad-supporting weapon, but it doesn't have a lot of ammunition.
You'd have to carry tons.
Carry tons, right. So Lara's I believe he was a PFC, again, another private first class, another really lower enlisted guy. They end up on a mountainside, and they're fighting the Germans. So his action took place over the course of 2 days. On May 27th, they find themselves pinned down.
43?
Yeah, I believe it was 1943. I'm sorry, we would have been at 44 at this point. I've been saying 43. 1944, May of 1944. They're pinned down. So according to his citation, he aggressively led his squad to maneuver to neutralize multiple strong points. So even though he's a PFC and he's not in charge, he doesn't have any control over anything other than his gun, he stands up and he leads these guys forward, okay? So we have multiple enemy strong points. It almost, gets repetitive because of these, but it's just that these Medal of Honors are so upstanding. So just like Sakato, just like Hernandez, almost like Ismail, he's moving forward with his automatic rifle, and he's attacking these multiple positions. He's not going by himself, though. He's moving with his squad like they're supposed to. So he takes out multiple enemy German positions like he should. Then he looks to his right, and they see that their right flanking unit is pinned down and they're getting messed up, right? The Germans have interlocking fire. The Germans have fortified positions. So rather than staying where he's at and letting them deal with it as they should, or as they might, he grabs 3 guys. He says, hey, you guys, come with me. I've got the automatic rifle. And they move forward and they attack these enemy positions, okay? So at the end of this, he ends up killing 4 Germans and he captures 15. But more importantly, he causes 2 German mortar positions to abandon their positions. So single-handedly kills 4 guys. He captures 15 guys, so think how many people that is out of the fight, and then he causes these others to flee. And again, just like all these other citations, just sheer will, sheer pushing forward, firing that machine gun, right? Now, mortars, you know what a mortar is?
Yeah.
Yeah, so mortars are extremely offensive weapons in this type of terrain because we have what's called defilade fire. If you can see me, I can see you, we can shoot each other. But if I get down in my hole, you can't shoot me. But the mortars can still hit me. So psychological effects of that, he's able to make 2 mortar crews abandon their position. So that's going to allow their troops to move forward again. So the very next day, they're moving in the same type of terrain, and he suffers a severe leg wound. A lot of times when you think about, I don't want to get shot in the chest or I don't want to get shot in the head, getting shot in the leg is probably one of the worst places to get because you have that big femoral artery right there, or however you want to say it, right?
And it's your mobility.
And it's your mobility, right? But if you get hit in the leg and you start bleeding, you better start putting a tourniquet on that thing fast, man. Traditionally, they used to just put pressure dressings or field dressings, but if you ever get a leg wound, you're at a big risk of dying, depending on where it is, if you start seeing that blood, right? So he's the BAR gunner. He's got that responsibility for his squad, for those 10 or 12 guys, because he's the automatic gunner. So they try to send him back to the rear, but he refuses. He refuses medical aid, and he wants to stay in the fight. So not knowing how bad his injury is, a leg wound that's bleeding, that can be a scratch, that can be permanently you're going to be in a wheelchair, or that could be that blood is pumping out of your body.
Couple minutes, you're dead.
Less than a minute if you hit the femoral.
Yeah.
And he might not know how bad he is because he's got adrenaline there in the fight. They have a lot of layers of clothing, things like that. It would be a good idea to err on the side of caution and just go back to that aid station, right?
Yeah.
But he is he's the BAR gunner, and he's not going to let his guys down. So he decides he's going to stay there.
So he understands his importance in this fight.
As a PFC, he understands his importance. So he stays in the fight, and they start moving forward. As they start moving forward, they immediately get pinned down by a machine gun. I've talked about the sounds of machine guns before, so I'm going to say this. If you hear a machine gun, it's terrifying. If you hear a German machine gun, it's even more terrifying. It sounds like a zipper. Those things, the rate of fire on those things is so insanely fast.
1550, right? 1,550 rounds. With
I'm not sure on that. We'll look it up, and I'll try to find a YouTube clip or something.
I was watching
like that.
Dragon Man's collection. I think he said it was 1,550 rounds a minute or something.
Gotcha. Compared to about 550 rounds per minute or something like that. So they're devastating. And I mean, even the Germans. I mean, we would have one automatic weapon per 10, 13 guys. They have every fifth guy has a handheld automatic. So their rate of fire is overwhelming towards us. They are a well-oiled machine, right? So Lara's lying there. He's bleeding from the leg. His guys are pinned down by a machine gun. He's got the BAR, right? He's cold, he's wet, he's tired, he's covered in mud, he's covered in scratches, he's covered with bruises, his leg's throbbing from this wound.
After spending 3 to 4 months on that beachhead.
After spending months on the line, after spending months away from home, after spending all these things, after not knowing how your family's doing, he decides, again, like we said in all these, I shouldn't even say his men because they're not under him. His friends' lives are worth more than his, or at least they're worth the chance of dying, right? So he doesn't get up and run. He doesn't charge like a football player. He crawls. He starts crawling towards the enemy position. While his own troops are pinning these guys down, he's crawling forward. He's moving. Every time he pushes his leg, he's feeling his leg throb, right? He's feeling that blood come out. He's not knowing. He's getting weaker by every single push because he's got that leg wound
scared, not knowing
out.
how bad it is.
Doesn't know how bad it is. He hasn't took his pants off to check. All he knows is that the enemy's in front of him and his friends are behind him. So he's crawling forward. He crawls till he gets into a position where he's close enough to attack, and then he stands up and he charges. He charges with his 20-round magazines. He moves forward while wounded, and he kills the machine gun crew. When he takes the machine gun out, another machine gun starts firing at him. So he hits the dirt. Again, had he done just that, he would have been good enough. But being who he is, he stands up again and he charges a second machine gun. And you gotta hear what these machine guns sound like to even understand what he's doing. Now he's charging with that leg wound.
Not just hearing them, they're aimed at you.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
To understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So he moves forward, and again he fires, and he's accurate with his BAR, and he's able to kill the machine gun crew. So he takes out a second machine gun crew. By his force of will, by his sheer initiative, the other enemies occupying this position, they stand up and they run, and he's able to break that attack, and his men are able to move forward.
Damn.
So initially for that, he was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross. So he's another one of these, like Jesus Duran, that was later upgraded to the Medal of Honor. Yeah, and Staccato. Yeah, the Valor 24, they call him after they were reviewed.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he survived the attack. He finally got back and got some treatment. And I thought it was funny, again, we talk about their character. We talked about with Villegas how he wrote back to his family about the scratch. There's a picture of Lara's Distinguished Service Cross and his Purple Heart, which he sent home to his family. And they're in these nice fancy cases, people cherish a lot of these things. He took a marker and wrote like a letter inside of the Purple Heart to his dad, which is funny because it almost shows like that it's not that big of a deal to him. But what he wrote in there to me, and again, with the picture, they don't have a lot of pictures, but he's got that sweet smile. He wrote, "My dearest daddy, I was wounded May 28th somewhere in Anzio area on my right leg. Lots of love, your son." And I thought it was so...
Sounds so childlike.
It sounds so... exact, and that's what struck me. And again, it's like, you can almost imagine what kind of relationship he has with his dad at that point, right? As opposed to, a lot of guys will write to their mom and stuff like that, but he calls his dad daddy, and he's a grown man who just killed almost a dozen Germans in close combat in this hard fighting, and he still writes "Dearest Dad." I thought it was sweet to me. It goes again. There's so many different types of personalities of these, but I don't know anything about his dad. Maybe his dad was older, maybe things like that. But I just, that picture of it said a lot to me.
Yeah.
My dearest daddy, and then it signed "Lots of love, your son."
Yeah.
And the way he just wrote it in marker with there and
That's
stuff like
inside
that.
the metal?
Inside the case, yeah. When you open up the case on the, it's like a veneer like lining and things like that.
Wow,
so,
crazy.
Yeah. So Lara survived his action. Just like all these others, though, you just continue fighting, right? So this is where the record gets a little bit blurry. I don't know how long he stayed in the unit. By the end of the war, he was in the 602nd Ordnance Armament Maintenance Battalion, and I don't know when he went there. Had he stayed in the 180, though, and he might have, they ended up being pulled out of Italy into southern France. When the invasion happened on D-Day in France, they ended up supporting through southern France. Now, again, May 27th, that's just a couple weeks before D-Day, right? June 6, 1944. So they're completely overshadowed by that. Almost no one even cares what's going on in Italy. But they end up pushing through France. At least France, for the most part, is flatter, but they fight all the way through France. They end the war in Germany. His unit actually was one of the units that liberated Dachau prison camp. So if he was still with his unit at the time, he would have been through Dachau, which is one of the most notorious concentration camps. They would have seen the bodies. Again, a kid from Riverside who grew up, granted, seeing the Depression and seeing all these things, but you're also living, that almost a prosperous life by World War II. We talked about it before with the swing dancing and the culture and the cars and the things like this. And now they're seeing the worst of humanity. And I don't know for a fact that he was there, but if he was still in the unit, they would have seen the ovens, they would have seen the body stack. There was actually, at Dachau, there was some American soldiers who actually executed the Germans out of anger after seeing what happened. So his unit was actually one of those that was part of that. I don't know if he was there or not.
So the American soldiers walked through and seeing the devastation just got so pissed that they just executed them?
Correct.
Awesome.
Yeah. And there's some debate on who was surrendering and who wasn't and things like that. But you can't exaggerate enough and make it anywhere near the reality of what the Holocaust actually was. Like I said, some of these camps, the Germans, before they retreated and left, they would try to execute as many prisoners as could. Some of them, they were burning the bodies. Rail cars, when they open the rail cars and there's nothing but just dead bodies stacked like cordwood, these guys that are just starving and dead. So these are the kinds of things that they would be seeing.
And they're facing that, seeing that.
Right.
That had to be heavy. Yeah. Jesus. Could you imagine?
So the war ended May 8th, 1945. On September 1st, 1945, for some unknown purposes or unknown cause, Lara ended up dying in peacetime Europe during the occupation. And an article I found.
What year?
1945. He died a couple months after the war ended.
Oh, man.
Yeah, so...
was he living there?
No. He's still a troop. He's still occupying. He's still in the army. Yeah, so I don't know if it was an accident.
So nobody knows.
I don't know if it was a result of his wound. His own brother doesn't know how he died. His own brother, in the article, he's elderly now, but he's the one that was awarded the Medal of Honor on his behalf. He said they don't know what happened to him. He just died. I found one article that said he died of wounds, but that might have been a mistake. So I don't know if his injury became gangrenous or infected, and he ended up dying out of sickness. Like I said, he ended up in an ordnance battalion. He could have died in an accident. He could have got hit by a car. We don't know. And again...
How interesting is that there's no record of that?
Had he been a Medal of Honor recipient, they would have been all kinds of documented, but just being a DSC, which is crazy.
Was it under Clinton that he was upgraded?
It's under Obama administration. So okay. I believe it started during the Bush administration. I should probably look this up to be certain. But again, the presidents have nothing to do with it.
Right.
But it was Obama's... the Valor 24 was Obama administration are the ones that awarded these medals to them.
Same one as Duran.
Yeah, same one as Duran. Okay. And again, he's part of the that is it Highway 91 or the 91 that has the sign.
Yes.
And then the libraries and things.
Oh, like so those are the three. He's one of the three faces.
Ismael Villegas.
Very
Jesus,
cool. Yeah, so I've seen his picture a bunch of times.
Yeah. He's up there. He's the smiling one.
Yeah.
Dearest Daddy. That's Salvador.
Awesome, man.
So. Again, unfortunately, he passed away, and you asked about the graves. He's actually buried overseas in a military graveyard with the white, again, if you've seen Saving Private Ryan, the white crosses.
Yep.
But his has the gold emblem of the Medal of Honor on it now. So
awesome,
that's pretty cool.
What a cool story.
Yeah, so I wish I knew a bit more about Salvador, but we can infer a lot from just what his unit was going through in Italy and what those troops were going through and what all those other guys were going through. And I'll post some pictures, like I said, of Willie and Joe so you can kind of see that and things like that. But if you have any concept of misery, that's what it was. When I talk about those things, like these guys it was so bad that their skin was falling off their feet. I don't think you need to say much more than that. And then you have this fanatical German army. And the German army was never broken in Italy. They were still fighting almost till the end of the war. They were, they had the positions. We beat them because of guys like Salvador Lara, though. We beat them because of these guys that were willing to fight through the rain, fight through the mud, fight through the hills, fight through the mountains.
Fight through hell, literally.
Fight through hell, literally. And then,
These are the little details of the stories that I think get overlooked is the build-up to these actions. You hear these actions, you go, oh, that's awesome, man. That's like Rambo, or that's something crazy. But you don't see the buildup and the misery, and imagine what it does to your mental, especially in a time like now.
Think about being tired.
Yes.
Just like I said.
Just being exhausted for one day.
Right.
Go drink tonight.
Exactly.
Be hungover tomorrow, and go to work and talk about how bad you feel.
And if you don't sleep for a whole night and you go, you're the equivalent of being drunk. These guys were sleeping on their feet. I remember in basic training distinctly one time on our the bayonet week-long final road march, 25 miles. I was literally walking, and I was totally unconscious. And then I kind of came to, and I started following the troops in front of me, and then I realized they weren't real people. I was just imagining people, and that my troops were going the other way, and I had to jump back. And that was like a week of misery. These guys were months of misery. Not to mention your nerves are shot. Not to mention people that you know are dying, right? At what point do you just...
How do you still have any kind of oomph in you?
There's another Willie and Joe comic where they said they're fugitive from the law of averages, because the law of averages is eventually going to catch up to you and you're going to die. So at some point you just figure you're the Walking Dead, right? But you still have guys that are willing to push forward, that are willing to get up and try to do something to save the other guys. And you can...
It's amazing.
Despite the lack of information we have on Lara, we know that he cared enough about his fellow guy. We know enough that he cared enough about his responsibilities as, I almost called him a machine gunner, as a BAR gunner. We know that he could fight on despite, again, I'd rather be shot in the chest than the leg, just for fear-wise, because if I get shot in the chest and I don't die immediately, I know I'm probably going to be okay and I can figure it out, right? But that leg wound, that blood pumping out, that femoral artery, if you can't slap a tourniquet on there fast.
And the sense of urgency you'd have to get help.
Right.
But no, I'm going to put off the help.
Right.
And I'm going to go face one of the most scary sounding machine gun positions ever, multiple.
And I'm going to crawl forward and I'm going to feel that pain, that pulsating.
That wound through the dirt.
And now I'm going to stand up and I'm going to charge. Then even if I was in the best shape of my life, it would be a terrifying thing. But now I'm hungry, tired, miserable, carrying all this equipment.
Haven't had a good night's sleep in a year, probably, or 6 months.
And you only have 20 rounds in your mag. You can finish that in a couple second bursts. So you got to preserve your fire or be able to change that magazine.
So not only
quick, so
not only is all this bravery happening, but the actual skill level still there.
Exactly.
Like so much stuff has to fall into place for that to happen, man.
Right.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Man, what a cool story. Salvador Lara.
So,
awesome.
Another Riverside guy, another Medal of Honor. Like I said, I think that's going to be our last of the San Bernardino, Redlands, Riverside. So we'll see where we're going to go from here. Maybe just some of the favorites.
If you guys have any stories,
any
like family stories from this time or any other time, make sure you leave it in the comment section. If you have any questions that you want to hear Chase answer.
or Donnie.
Yeah. Yeah, I got all kinds of knowledge. Leave them in the comment section. We'll give you a big shout out on the show. And we're going to be doing up some other small videos. Chase is getting tattooed this week, and we're going to do some question and answer stuff there. But yeah, don't be shy. Ask some questions. You have anything you're curious about? No such thing as a stupid question. Other than that, what you got?
That's all I got, man. Thanks for listening for those of you that are, and rock and roll.
All right, we'll see you guys next week.
Cool.